Dear viewers, a very warm welcome from Aviation and Air Traffic Control. In this lecture, we will discuss about the air traffic service provided by Aerodrome Control Tower. Aerodrome Control Service shall be provided by an Aerodrome Control Tower. Aerodrome Control is responsible for the control of air traffic under its control to achieve a safe, orderly and expeditious flow of air traffic. An aerodrome controller has authority over aircraft, vehicles, and personnel on the maneuvering area and aircraft moving on the apron. Aerodrome control may be divided into tower controller, surface movement controller, and clearance delivery position. Clearance delivery is responsible for delivery of startup and air traffic control clearance to departing IFR flights. There are two ways of delivering clearance to departing aircraft. First, by radio telephony, and second, by data link. Phraseology used for level clearance. Delay delivery, Cactus 135, Gate 11. Total 223 passengers through security. Request level clearance for Paris, flight level 380. The second method of clearance delivery is using data link. Data link clearances are means of pre-departure clearances to airline pilots using data link. It is used at high-density airports to avoid frequency congestion. Ground controller, normally responsible for traffic on the maneuvering area, with the exception of runways. Ground issues pushback and taxi clearances. Aerodrome controller is responsible for operations on the runway and aircraft flying within the area of responsibility of the aerodrome control tower. An aerodrome control unit shall provide aerodrome control service and alerting service. At low traffic density airports, aerodrome control tower, ground, and clearance delivery positions are combined and work as a single unit. Functions of aerodrome control tower. Aerodrome control shall issue information and instructions to aircraft under its control to achieve a safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic with the objective of preventing collisions between aircraft flying in and in the vicinity of the aerodrome, aircraft taking off and landing, preventing collisions between aircraft and vehicles, and obstructions and other aircraft on the maneuvering area. Aerodrome control tower shall provide alerting and safety services. Aerodrome control tower shall inform aircraft under its control of any degradation of the aerodrome emergency services. Aerodrome control tower shall inform approach unit about any pertinent data on instrument flight rules, spatial visual flight rules, and visual flight rule traffic, including departures, missed approaches, and overdue aircraft. They have to also inform appropriate items of essential aerodrome information to the approach control unit. Aerodrome control tower shall inform the aerodrome operator when it becomes apparent that there is a deterioration in the state of aerodrome or associated facilities for which the aerodrome operator is responsible. Aerodrome controller has to initiate overdue actions at aerodromes where no approach control unit is established. Aerodrome control shall coordinate with approach control about the departing instrument flight rules flights, about the arriving aircraft which make their first call on the tower frequency unless they are transferred to approach control. Approach control will coordinate with aerodrome control about any aircraft approaching to land and if necessary requesting landing clearance on approach frequency. arriving aircraft which are to be clear to visual holding points, or about the aircraft which are routing through the traffic circuit. The responsibility for control of a departing aircraft shall be transferred from aerodrome control tower to approach control unit in visual meteorological conditions prior to the aircraft leaving the vicinity of the aerodrome, or prior to the aircraft entering into instrument meteorological conditions. And if instrument meteorological conditions are prevailing, the aerodrome control tower shall release the aircraft immediately after the airborne to the approach control unit. Traffic circuit. Position 1. Aircraft reports on downwind leg when abeam upwind end of the runway. Position 2. Sometimes aircraft reports late downwind if it is on the downwind leg, has been unable to report downwind and pass the downwind end of the runway. Position 3 of the aircraft is base leg. Position 4 of the aircraft is final and clearance to land is issued here. Position 5, aircraft reports long final. It is between 8 to 4 nautical miles from touchdown for the straight-in approach. Departure aircraft request pre-departure instructions at gate. Clearance delivery issues route clearance, departure instructions, and allots squawk. So here we are discussing about the taxi circuit. Departure aircraft after completion of boarding request for pushback or taxi clearance, and taxi clearances are issued by ground controller. Prior to issuing a taxi clearance, the ground controller shall determine where the aircraft concerned is parked. Taxi clearances shall contain concise instructions and adequate information so as to assist the flight crew to follow the correct taxi routes, which will help them to avoid collision with other aircraft or objects and to minimize the potential for aircraft inadvertently entering an active runway. When a taxi clearance contains a taxi limit beyond a runway, it shall contain an explicit clearance to cross or an instruction to hold short of that runway. Aircraft can be allowed to taxi on a runway in use. For the purpose of expediting air traffic, aircraft may be permitted to taxi on the runway in use, provided there should be no delay or risk to other aircraft, and communication with the aircraft concerned should be transferred from ground controller to the aerodrome controller prior to the aircraft entering the runway. During poor visibility, if the control tower is unable to determine either visually or via an air traffic service surveillance system that a vacation or crossing aircraft has cleared the runway, the aircraft shall be requested to report when it has vacated the runway, and the pilot shall make this report when the entire aircraft is beyond the relevant runway holding position. Departure aircraft on taxiway for holding point of the runway in use, which is the ground clearance limit for the departure taxiing aircraft. If there is a conflicting traffic, the departing aircraft will be held at this position until the landing aircraft has passed the point of intended landing. This is holding position. Engine run-up, if required, normally are performed here. Takeoff clearances are normally issued to departing aircraft at location number 4 or location number 5. Landing clearances are issued to arrival aircraft at 2 nautical miles from touchdown. After landing rolls completes, aerodrome control tower issue clearance to taxi to apron at location number 6 to reduce runway occupancy time. And sometimes where rapid exit taxiways are available, controller issues runway vacation with landing clearance. Exit taxiways are mutually coordinated for each flight between tower and ground controller. Arrival aircraft once vacates runway, aerodrome control tower transfer the communication to the ground controller, and ground controller issues taxi clearance to the arrival for the gate. Selection of runway news. The term runway news means runway which is at a particular time is considered by the aerodrome control tower to be the most suitable for the use by the types of aircraft expected to land or take off at the aerodrome. Runway news information is available in automated terminal information system, which is known as ATIS. Clearance delivery issues standard instrument departures based on runway news. When selecting the runway news, aerodrome control shall take into consideration some other factors such as traffic pattern, the length of runway or landing runs, approach aids available, or any meteorological conditions which may be significant to the choice of a runway. Sometimes we use out of wind runway. There are numerous reasons for using an out of wind runway, such as operations requirement, efficiency, where out of runway is close to a particular gate, an aircraft takes less time for taxi and takeoff, and do some noise abatement procedures. Now we will discuss about the startup time procedures. Startup time procedures should be contained in the local instructions or in the Manual of Air Traffic Services Part 2. Part 2 is a local manual for the specific aerodrome, and it should specify the criteria and conditions for determining when and how startup times shall be calculated and issued to the departing aircraft. If for any reason a startup clearance is withheld, the flight crew shall be advised of the reason. Aerodrome and meteorological information. Prior to taxiing for takeoff, a departing aircraft shall be advised of the following elements of information, and it should be in the order listed, with the exception if the aircraft has already received this information. First, runway news. Second, surface wind direction and speed, including significant variations. Third, the QNH altimeter setting, and if requested by the aircraft, the QFE altimeter setting. The air temperature for the runway to be used. Next, visibility, and the last, correct time. And you can remember this by acronym RWQTVT. Prior to takeoff, aircraft shall be advised of any significant changes in surface wind direction and speed, air temperature, visibility, or the RVR values, or any significant meteorological conditions which have been observed in takeoff or climb out area, except if we believe that this information has already been received by the aircraft. Prior to entering the traffic circuit or commencing its approach to land, an aerodrome control tower shall inform the arriving aircraft about the runway to be used, the surface wind direction and speed, and including significant variations, and the QNH altimeter settings, or if so requested by the aircraft, the QFE altimeter setting. Information to the arriving aircraft by air traffic controller shall be transmitted in the order listed. First is type of approach and runway news. Second is MET information, which include following elements: surface wind direction and speed, including significant variations, visibility and if available runway visual range of that runway, present weather, cloud below 5,000 feet or below minimum sector altitude, whichever is greater, Thereafter, air temperature, dew point, altimeter settings, or any available information on significant meteorological phenomena in the approach area, and trend, which is when available. Thereafter, current runway surface condition, change in operational status of visual or non-visual aids, any change in runway or instrument approach procedures initially stated shall be advised without delay. Suppose you have advised aircraft about instrument ILS approach, and thereafter if you feel that instrument landing system is not working, then the controller shall advise expect visual approach or viewer approach. It should be provided in timely so that the pilot can prepare him for that particular approach. At the commencement of final approach, ATC shall provide following information. Any significant changes in the mean surface wind direction and speed, where the significant changes means a headwind component of 10 knots, tailwind component of 2 knots, and crosswind component of 5 knots. So from front it should be 10, from back it should be 2, and from right or left it should be 5. If this is there, then this information has to be provided to the landing aircraft. If the tower controller has any latest information about wind shear or turbulence, that has to be provided to the landing aircraft without delay. The current visibility or RVR, including trend, whatever is observed on the instrument shall be passed to the pilot for his decision. During final approach, the following information shall be transmitted by aerodrome control tower without delay: the sudden occurrence of hazard, the significant variation in current surface wind, significant changes in runway surface conditions, changes in the operational status of required visual or non-visual aids, changes observed in RVR or visibility. Now we will discuss about essential local traffic information. Information on essential local traffic shall be issued in a timely manner, either directly if the aircraft is in contact with aerodrome control tower, or if it is on final approach and with approach, it shall be provided through approach control service. When in the judgment of aerodrome controller, such information is necessary in the interest of safety, or it can be requested by aircraft also. Essential local traffic shall be considered to consist of any aircraft or any vehicle or personnel on or near the maneuvering area, or traffic operating in the vicinity of the aerodrome which may constitute a hazard to the aircraft concerned. Now we will discuss about runway incursion or obstructed runway. In the event the aerodrome control tower observes that after a takeoff clearance or after issuing a landing clearance, any obstruction on the runway which will likely to impair the safety of an aircraft taking off or landing, such as runway incursion by aircraft or vehicle, or presence of animals or flock of birds on the runway, he should take appropriate action. First, he has to cancel the takeoff clearance for a departing aircraft. If the arriving aircraft landing clearance has been issued, he has to instruct him to execute a go around. And in both cases, he has to inform the concerned aircraft of the runway incursion or obstruction and its location in relation to the runway. Wake turbulence and jet blast hazard. Aerodrome controllers shall apply the wake turbulence separation minima, and whenever the responsibility for wake turbulence avoidance rests with the pilot in command, aerodrome controller shall, to the extent practicable, advise aircraft of the expected occurrence of hazard caused by turbulent wake. In issuing clearances or instructions, air traffic controllers should take into account the hazards caused by jet blast and propeller slip stream to taxiing aircraft or to the aircraft taking off or landing, particularly when intersecting runways are being used, and to the vehicles and personnel operating on the aerodrome behind these aircraft. Essential aerodrome information is that concerning the state of the maneuvering area and its associated facilities that may constitute a hazard to a particular aircraft. It shall be issued to the pilot in sufficient time to ensure the safe operation of aircraft. This may include the provision of urgent information to pilots during aircraft takeoff and landing runs. Essential aerodrome information shall include construction work or maintenance work on the maneuvering area, failure or irregular functioning of aerodrome lighting system, failure or irregular functioning of approach aids, aircraft parked close to the runways or taxiways, report on runway surface condition, report on estimated braking action, report on bird movements which are observed in the immediate vicinity of the aerodrome. Now we will discuss about the control of other than aircraft traffic. Entry to the maneuvering area. Maneuvering area is the area used by aircraft for taxi, takeoff and landing, and it exclude the apron area. So the movement of pedestrian or vehicles including towed aircraft on the maneuvering area of an aerodrome shall be controlled by the aerodrome control tower. This is necessary to avoid hazard to them or to the aircraft landing, taxiing or taking off. Persons, including drivers of all vehicles, shall be required to obtain authorization from aerodrome control tower before entering to the maneuvering area. Priority of movement on maneuvering area. This should be in the order listed. The first priority is for the emergency vehicles which are proceeding to the assistance of an aircraft in distress and shall be afforded priority over all other surface movement traffic. Second priority is for landing, taking off or taxiing aircraft. In this case, vehicles or vehicles towing aircraft and pedestrians shall give way to the aircraft which are landing, taking off or taxiing. Third priority is for towing aircraft, and these towing aircraft which are used with the help of vehicles. So vehicles shall give way to other vehicles which are used for the towing aircraft. Fourth priority is for the vehicles which have been given specific instructions by air traffic service units. Order of priority for arriving and departing aircraft. An aircraft landing or which is in the final stages of an approach to land shall normally have priority over an aircraft intending to depart from the same or an intersecting runway. Departure sequence. Time taken for startup or pushback and taxiing time for various parking areas differ greatly. Therefore, departure sequence shall not be determined on startup request time. Departures shall normally be cleared in the order in which they are ready for takeoff. Except this, some deviations may be made from this order of priority to facilitate the maximum number of departures with the least average delay. Factors which should be considered in relation to the departure sequence include type of aircraft and their relative performance, routes to be followed after takeoff, any specified minimum departure intervals between two takeoffs, need to apply wake turbulence separation minima, aircraft which should be afforded priority, and aircraft which are subject to air traffic flow management requirements. Separation of departing aircraft with other aircraft. A departing aircraft will normally not be permitted to commence takeoff until the preceding departing aircraft has crossed the end of runway in use, or the preceding departing aircraft has started a turn, or until all preceding arriving landing aircraft are clear of runway in use. Separation of landing aircraft with other aircraft. A landing aircraft will not normally be permitted to cross the runway threshold on its final approach until the preceding departing aircraft has crossed the runway end or it has started its turn, or until all preceding landing aircraft are clear of runway in use. Suspension of visual flight rule operations. Any or all VFR operations on and in the vicinity of aerodrome may be suspended by any of the following units whenever safety requires such actions. It can be done by approach control unit, it can be done by aerodrome control unit, or it can be done by area control unit. However, all such suspensions of VFR operations shall be accomplished through, or it should be notified to the aerodrome control tower. Suspension of visual flight rule operations. Aerodrome control tower, whenever suspends VFR operations, shall hold all VFR departures, recall all local flights operating under VFR, or he has to obtain approval for special VFR operations from the unit which is providing approach control service. He has to notify the approach control unit or area control unit as appropriate of the action taken. Aerodrome control tower shall also notify all operators or their designated representatives of the reason for taking such actions if necessary or if requested. Authorization of special VFR flights. Whenever the ground visibility is not less than 1500 meters, special VFR flights may be authorized to enter a control zone for the purpose of landing, takeoff and depart from a control zone, or to cross a control zone, or to operate locally within a control zone. In this, performance class 1 and performance class 2 and military helicopters are authorized to operate special VFR flights even though the ground visibility is 1000 meters. So, whenever traffic conditions permit, special VFR flights may be authorized subject to the approval by the approach control unit and with the following provisions. Request for such authorizations shall be handled individually. Separations shall be effected between all special VFR flights and IFR flights in accordance with the separation minima applicable to the IFR flights.